The front door of my Seattle home exploded open. Mason stormed through, his face set in a demand. "Dad, I need $5,000 right now." I froze by my desk. The aggressive edge in his voice was a physical shock. He was making demands, not asking for help. "Mason, what? I already transferred your monthly amount last week. The $3,000 barely covers my rent." He paced my living room, fists clenched. "You think that's enough? You think that covers everything? I built my auto shops from nothing, working 18-hour days after Sarah died, sacrificing everything for him. Son, we've talked about this. You need to find steady work." He spun around, red-faced. "Why should I work when you're sitting on all this money? When you control everything like some dictator?" The accusation stung. I straightened my shoulders. "I'm trying to teach you responsibility." He laughed bitterly. "You want to know about responsibility? After you die, I'll be an amazing master of your auto shops. I'll run them better than you ever did." The words hung like poison. The casual way he spoke about my death, the calculation behind his eyes, it was pure greed. In that moment, 20 years of sacrifice crumbled. He realized he'd revealed too much, spun around, and slammed the door behind him. The family photo on the mantel rattled, Sarah's smiling face trembling behind the glass. The next morning, I looked at that photo again. Sarah's funeral, the crushing grief, the promise I'd made her to care for him. I had thrown money at every problem: private school, college, a new Honda Civic. Every handout, every crisis solved with my checkbook had carved away pieces of his character. I thought I was being a good father. Instead, I created a stranger who calculated my death like a business transaction. I sat at Sarah's old chair, whispering to the empty room. I failed her. I had spent 20 years trying to buy his love, compensating for my own guilt. I had convinced myself that providing was the same as parenting. Sunday morning, I was drafting legal documents, precautions against the worst possibilities, when Mason called. His voice was unnaturally cheerful. "Dad, hey, how are you doing? Look, I was way out of line last week, and I wanted to make it right. Actually, I have a proposal. Something that could fix everything between us." He proposed we go camping together in Alaska, Denali National Park. Just you and me, like when I was a kid. He claimed his buddies canceled, and the prepaid tickets, flights, gear, permits expired tomorrow. The urgency, the sudden enthusiasm for the wilderness he hadn't cared about since childhood, screamed warning. But underneath the suspicion, I heard a desperate sliver of hope. "The flights leave March 25th, Mason pressed. 5 days in the wilderness, just like the old times. This might be our last chance to fix what's broken." I stared down at the legal papers on my desk. "All right," I heard myself say. "Let's do it." 3 days later, I folded the legal documents and slipped them into my travel bag's inner pocket. They felt heavy with possibilities. At the gate, Mason was overly excited. On the first flight, he was too chatty, constantly on his phone. During a layover, he took 3 20-minute bathroom breaks. My military training flagged the nervous energy and the performance. In Anchorage, he insisted on buying specific gear: high-powered flashlights, emergency flares, rope, far more than needed for basic camping. The clerk, a weathered man, eyed our purchases, asking if we planned to get lost. Driving toward Denali, I watched Mason on his phone in the gas station window, his posture hunched, his voice low and urgent. He lied about checking the weather. I'd already checked the forecast myself. Clear skies were predicted. My gut instinct, honed by years in hostile territory, was screaming. Something was wrong. At the Denali Lodge Motel, Mason immediately asked the clerk about the most remote and challenging route, the Atlantica River backcountry route. Park Ranger Jennifer Walsh gave us a stern briefing. She spread a map across the table. Atlantica River route takes you 30 miles from the nearest ranger station. No cell coverage. No other campers this time of year. She pointed to red markers on the map. Recent Grizzly activity here, here, and here. Mason was choosing the hardest, most isolated place for our reconnection. I was sure now. The wilderness wasn't the setting for fixing our relationship. It was the setting for my death. 2 cubs were spotted last week, which means a protective mother nearby. We've had wolf pack sightings, and moose are unpredictable. Ranger Jennifer Walsh's stern warnings confirmed my worst fears. Mason leaned forward, studying the map's isolated sections, asking about emergency evacuation. Helicopter rescue, weather permitting, could be days if conditions turn bad. I answered honestly about my military survival background, while Mason mumbled vague references to camping. The ranger's doubt was visible, but Mason insisted, my father's practically a survival expert. After signing liability waivers, we rented food containers and emergency beacons. I insisted on a defensive Remington 870 rifle. Alaska rule number 1, I stated, never go unarmed in bear country. Mason looked nervous. Loading the packs, I felt the familiar pre-mission tension. Every detail screamed warning. The remote location, Mason's insistence on maximum isolation. Still sure about this route? I asked. Mason's smile was forced. Absolutely. No turning back now, right, Dad? The finality of the phrase chilled me. The forest road narrowed, branches scraping the truck. We passed the last cell tower, and my phone went dead. We're officially off the grid now, I murmured. Mason's laugh was hollow. At mile 23, Tlonica, the road ended. I parked beside weathered wooden posts. Mason struggled awkwardly with his new pack, wincing when I adjusted the strap. You hurt yourself? I asked. Old injury, nothing serious. The lie came too easily. The trail was immediately challenging. Moose tracks, eagle cries, and the distant howl of wolves. Mason was visibly frightened, which struck me as odd for someone who had insisted on this route. After 3 hours, we reached a clearing. I methodically set up the perimeter, food cache 12 feet high, cooking downwind, emergency supplies accessible. Mason, meanwhile, struggled with basic tent assembly. By the campfire, I tried to connect, sharing memories of his mother and our old trips. Tell me about your childhood, Dad, he asked, showing rare interest in my poor, hard-working background. His tone, however, suggested calculation rather than sympathy. Hard work built character, I said. Lucky for me, right? Getting to skip all that character building. His resentment was clear. How do you know when someone's lying to you? He asked suddenly. Body language, voice patterns, inconsistencies in their story, I replied, poking the fire. I crawled into my tent, trusting him to take the first watch. The last sound I heard was careful stillness, suggesting waiting rather than watching. Dawn brought frigid air and the sound of metallic clanking. I unzipped the tent flap. Mason stood by the truck, packing all the gear with unnatural efficiency. What's going on? My voice was sharp. Getting ready to leave. Weather's turning bad, he lied. The sky was clear. Mason talked to me. What's really happening here? Years of controlled resentment erupted. I'm done. Done with your control, your manipulation, your constant judgment. Don't call me son, he spat. Sons don't get treated like employees. Sons don't have to beg for every dollar while their father sits on millions. I've given you everything. You've given me nothing. You made me dependent, kept me weak, controlled every aspect of my life with your checkbook. Well, guess what? I'm taking control now. Understanding crashed over me. The trip was planned. Finally catching on, military genius. His laugh was cold. You're planning to leave me here. Yes, I'm leaving you here to figure things out for yourself. Maybe 30 miles of wilderness will teach you what real dependence feels like. He slammed the tailgate shut. Without equipment, without GPS, this is bear country. You should have thought about that before you made me into your puppet. He climbed into the driver's seat. Goodbye, Dad. Try not to meet the Grizzlies too quickly. I want you to have time to think about what you created. The truck roared to life and disappeared, leaving me alone on an empty dirt road. The silence that followed was absolute. My son, the boy I had sacrificed everything for, had just sentenced me to death. The emotional devastation was quickly overridden by military survival training. Shock was a luxury I couldn't afford. Assess resources. Pockets held a wallet, house keys, and a small folding knife. No food, no water, no GPS, no emergency beacon, no rifle. Evaluate environment. March in Alaska, below freezing nights, 30 miles from civilization, high grizzly and wolf activity. Prioritize needs. Shelter, water, signaling, navigation. I forced myself to breathe and began walking west, following the faint tire tracks. West led toward the main park road. Fury at Mason's betrayal and my own blindness fueled every step. My body protested, but I kept moving, snapping branches to create crude trail markers. The forest closed in, dark and hostile. Bear sign appeared everywhere. The battle for my life had begun. Claw marks on tree bark, massive paw prints in soft earth, and scat that looked disturbingly fresh, all confirmed the ranger's warnings. I made noise while walking, remembering the instructions about avoiding surprise bear encounters. The irony was bitter. My son had placed me in a situation where bears might be the least of my problems. Exhaustion and dehydration were rapidly setting in when I heard a distant, rhythmic, mechanical sound. Engines. Multiple engines. Hope surged through my chest for the first time. I changed direction, pushing through the undergrowth toward the sound of all-terrain vehicles, ATVs. Breaking through the tree line, I stumbled into a clearing where 4 ATV riders were taking a break. They looked up in shock at my disheveled, scratched appearance. The lead rider, a bearded man with professional concern, immediately shut off his engine. "Sir, what happened? Why are you out here alone?" My voice was hoarse. "My son, he left me here. Took all our equipment and drove away." I explained that he had abandoned me for my inheritance. The man, Oliver Reed, a former park ranger here, removed his helmet. "Someone abandoned you here? That's attempted murder." He handed me a water bottle, which I gratefully drained. "How long ago did this happen?" Oliver asked, his tone urgent. "This morning, maybe 4 hours ago." Oliver quickly consulted his GPS. "We need to get you out of here immediately. If your son took the main road out, he's looking at a 6-hour drive minimum to reach Anchorage. But I know an old ranger shortcut that cuts through the backcountry. We can have you back at the park entrance in 90 minutes. A thought hit me like electricity. "You mean I could get back before him?" "Easily," Oliver confirmed. "The question is, do you want to involve law enforcement immediately, or do you have other plans?" Replacing the fear in my chest was a cold, hard resolve. Mason had miscalculated. He had underestimated the wilderness community's solidarity and my own survival instincts. "I want to get back to the motel first," I said carefully, "before I decide anything about police." Oliver nodded, a shared understanding passing between us. "Climb on behind me. We'll take the ranger trail. Your son will never see us coming." The ATV ride was rough but fast. Oliver, navigating with the confidence of 15 years as a ranger, explained that deliberate abandonment was criminal territory. We emerged onto the paved road well ahead of schedule. The Denali Lodge Motel looked incredibly welcoming. "Looks like your son's still driving back," Oliver observed. "You've got time to prepare whatever reception you're planning." I looked toward the motel room where our belongings waited, then at the legal documents still folded in my jacket pocket. "I'm going to give him exactly what he wants," I said quietly, "just not the way he expects to get it." Back in the motel room, I pulled out my phone and dialed Oliver. I needed everything documented. "I'm planning to give him exactly what he thought he wanted," I explained, "the chance to inherit my business, right up until the moment he realizes what he's actually done to himself." Oliver agreed to come back with his digital camera to serve as a witness. "Mason's going to say things that should be preserved for a jury." I calculated Mason's route. He would return between 9 o'clock and 10 p.m., tired, overconfident, expecting to find an empty room. Next, I called my attorney in Seattle. The new will, which left Mason absolutely nothing, would be officially filed tomorrow morning, regardless of tonight's outcome. At 8:15 p.m., Oliver arrived, setting up professional audio and video recording equipment in the adjoining room. "Attempted murder in the first degree," he confirmed grimly. "With your testimony, my witness statement, and whatever he says tonight, he's looking at serious prison time." I nodded, feeling a cold satisfaction. Then we waited. At 8:47 p.m., headlights swept across the parking lot. Mason's rental truck had returned from his failed murder attempt. I positioned myself in the chair facing the door, the legal documents clearly visible on the desk. Mason's key scraped the lock. When the door opened, he stepped inside, expecting to find an empty room. He froze when he saw me. "Dad." The word came out strangled, disbelieving. "Hello, son. How was your drive?" His face cycled through shock and terror. "How are you here? How did you get back?" "I left you 30 miles out." "Yes, I remember." I kept my voice conversational. "Turns out I'm harder to kill than you calculated. Go meet the Grizzlies. It really captured the sentiment beautifully." "Dad, wait. You don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly. You brought me to Alaska to murder me for my inheritance. You spent months planning it, researched the most remote location possible, even practiced your shocked look for when the authorities found my body. The problem with your plan, Mason, is that you underestimate the wilderness community. There are people who actually help each other survive. I walked to the desk and picked up the legal documents. You want to know what's fascinating? 3 weeks ago, right after our fight, I changed my will. Mason inherits nothing. Not the auto shops, not the bank accounts, not the house your mother loved. Everything goes to charity. The color drained from his face completely. You can't do that. I'm your son. You were my son. This morning you became something else entirely. Mason's composure snapped. You self-righteous bastard. You created this. Your constant control, your manipulation, keeping me dependent while judging every choice I made. This is your creation. I felt a strange calm. You're absolutely right. I did create this. I enabled your dependence, bought your affection, confused providing with parenting. That's my failure as a father. Then change the will. Fix this. The will was filed this afternoon. It's done. I walked toward the door, past my son, who now looked defeated and small. But you're wrong about one thing. I didn't create your willingness to commit murder. I paused at the threshold, the silence in the room suddenly complete. That choice was entirely yours, I told him. Mason's voice cracked. Where are you going? To call the police. Attempted murder is still a felony, even when it fails. Dad, wait. I stepped out and closed the door. Goodbye, Mason. In a strange way, you've given me exactly what I needed. Absolute clarity about who you really are. The last image I carried was my son collapsing into the chair, staring at the legal documents, the complete destruction of everything he'd tried to gain. The fluorescent lights in the Anchorage Police Department interview room buzzed overhead. Detective Sarah Martinez, reviewing Oliver's digital recordings, my sworn statement, and Mason's recorded confession, looked at me with 8 years of experience behind her eyes. Mr. Harper, this is the most premeditated case of attempted murder I've encountered. Your son's statements are remarkably incriminating. I could see Mason through the interview room window, being processed at the booking desk, now stripped of all pretense. The overnight in jail had done its work. Oliver, sitting beside me, asked the question I couldn't. What's the likely sentence? 15 to 25 years, depending on plea negotiations, the detective stated. Alaska views deliberate wilderness abandonment as equivalent to attempted murder, because that's exactly what it is. I watched my son, feeling not satisfaction, but an unexpected absence of emotion. This wasn't victory. It was just the natural endpoint of choices he had made. Will you be returning to Seattle today? Detective Martinez asked. Tomorrow. I need to visit my attorney here first, finalize some estate planning documents. I'm establishing a foundation in my late wife's name. Seems appropriate that Mason's inheritance should help people who actually deserve assistance. Oliver and I walked out into the crisp Anchorage morning air. Downtown traffic moved with its typical unhurried, purposeful pace. What happens now? Oliver asked. Back to figure out what kind of man I want to be in whatever years I have left. Turns out surviving your own child's murder attempt gives you remarkable clarity about priorities. You plan to visit him during the trial? I considered the question seriously, the faint paternal instinct warring with the reality of his betrayal. No. The man I raised died somewhere in those woods yesterday morning. What's left isn't my son anymore. We reached Oliver's truck. He handed me his card. If you ever want to come back to Alaska for the right reasons, call me. First trip's on the house. Why would you do that? Because you survived something that should have killed you. And instead of letting it make you bitter, you're using it to help other people. That's worth supporting. I shook his hand, thanking the stranger who would become an unlikely, genuine ally. Thank the wilderness community. We look out for each other up here. I call my attorney in Seattle. There are foundations to establish, scholarships to fund, a lifetime of enabling to undo through positive action. Mason had brought me to Alaska to die for money. Instead, I'd learned to live for purpose. In trying to destroy me, he had accidentally taught me the difference between providing for someone and actually caring about them. 3 days later, back in Seattle, I received a 5-page letter from Mason in jail, a final piece of manipulation disguised as an apology. I read it once, then fed it through my office shredder. Some relationships don't survive attempted murder, no matter how much money you've invested in them. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the right.